Why was everyone staring at her boots instead of her eyes? That was Anna Sharma's first thought when she stepped off the Osprey. The air hit her like a physical blow, not just heat but texture. A thick granular presence that stuck to her skin, filled her throat, and seemed to whisper through her gear. Forward operating base Aries wasn't a place so much as a sentence, a stretch of scorched dust and rusting metal that dared you to keep breathing. The rotors of the Osprey churned up a sandstorm behind her, its fatting roar the last trace of a world that had air conditioning, coffee breaks, and the illusion of safety. She stood for a moment in the raw silence that followed, one gloved hand on her rifle case. The sun was a merciless white coin above her, flattening all color into shades of tan and gray. Around her, soldiers moved with that peculiar lethargy born of exhaustion and discipline, not slow, just conserving what little the desert hadn't already stolen from them. 42 years old. Master Sergeant. Too clean. The uniform gave her away immediately, the crisp creases, the lack of sweat stains, the faintly polished boots. In a place like Aries, where dirt was a badge of belonging, she looked like an intruder. 3 men lounged in the patchy shadow of a stacked shipping container, rifles propped beside them. Their laughter was low, but it carried the sound of men too long unchallenged in their small domain. "Must be lost," one of them muttered, just loud enough for the desert wind to carry it to her. "Supply depot, that way, ma'am." She didn't answer. Her eyes, gray, sharp, calm, passed over them once. She didn't need to read their name tapes. Everything she needed to know was in the way they slouched, the way their weapons gleamed with the obsessive care of men who worshipped the tools of their trade. They were snipers, elite, self-declared kings of their range. Their leader, Sergeant Kellen Jensen, watched her approach with a smirk that had probably served him well in 100 bars and a dozen briefings. His helmet bore his call sign, Aries, stenciled in neat black, his own name, his own myth. She stopped in front of them. The case in her hand bore no stickers, no slogans, no marks of pride or rebellion, just government issue, plain, untouched. "Looking for Colonel Rostova's command post," she said evenly. Jensen pushed himself upright with the lazy grace of a man who'd never been afraid of being hit. "You're the replacement for Gunny Martinez." She nodded once, "Master Sergeant Sharma." He repeated her name like he was tasting it, trying to find a flavor in it. "Heard you've been pushing paper in Tampa. Bet the air conditioning was nice." Behind him, his teammates Corporal Diaz and Specialist Bell chuckled. Bell added, "Careful with that rifle, Master Sergeant. Sun's hot, might warp the plastic." Her gaze settled on him and something in the air changed. She didn't glare. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, a quiet pressure that made Bell's smile falter and die. "Colonel Rostova's post," she said again, voice steady. Jensen's smirk wavered just for a second. He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Big tent with the antennas. She's expecting you. Try not to get heatstroke on the way." As she walked past, their muttered laughter returned, brittle now, uncertain. When she reached the command tent, she paused. The flap was heavy canvas, bleached nearly white by the sun. She drew one slow breath before stepping inside. The temperature dropped, but the air was still thick, heavy with sweat, stale coffee, and something faintly metallic. Maps covered the walls, every inch marked in red and blue lines, borders that meant everything to someone far away and nothing to the wind outside. Colonel Eva Rostova stood over a digital map table, her presence sharp and self-contained. She looked up, assessing the newcomer without warmth. "Master Sergeant Sharma." It wasn't a greeting, it was an evaluation. "Ma'am." "Your file precedes you," Rostova said. "Commendations from a decade ago. Then 5 years in Tampa, signals analysis, desk work." "Yes, ma'am." Rostova's gaze hardened. "This is not Tampa. Out there," she gestured toward the desert beyond the tent, "is the El Hadjer corridor. I lost one of my best snipers 2 weeks ago. His spotter missed a heat signature. I need a trigger puller, not an analyst. I need someone who can stay motionless for 72 hours and make a 2,000-meter shot in a crosswind that can strip paint from a Humvee. Can you still do that? Sharma didn't flinch. Yes, ma'am. Rostova studied her for a long, silent moment. Then, tomorrow at 800, range qualification, 52 targets, mixed distance, stress-induced. Sergeant Jensen's record stands at 51 hits, one malfunction cleared in 4 seconds. You'll use standard issue, no custom parts, no favored mods. If you're not perfect, you're on the next Osprey back to CENTCOM. Understood? Perfectly, Colonel. The colonel nodded once. Then get your gear, see the armorer, range at 7:30. Dismissed without another word, Sharma stepped back into the sunlight. Outside, Jensen and his team were still nearby, cleaning their rifles in exaggerated fashion. They'd clearly heard everything. Well, Jensen drawled, guess you're dancing for your supper tomorrow, Master Sergeant. The mirage gets bad after 900 hours. Wind's tricky. I'll keep that in mind. Hey, he called as she passed. Make sure you get a good magazine from the armory. Some of the old ones have weak springs, might jam on you. Wouldn't want that. She stopped, turned her head slightly. Thank you for the advice. He smiled, wide and white, just trying to help. She walked on without another word. That night, while the others crowded the chow hall and joked under the flickering lights of the wrecked tent, Sharma sat alone in the armory's maintenance bay. The overhead fluorescents buzzed faintly. The air smelled of oil, metal, and quiet. She opened the case. The M110A1 lay inside, standard issue, worn but serviceable. She stripped it down to its bones, pins, springs, bolts, the precise anatomy of a living thing. Her hands moved with the calm assurance of memory. 5 years behind a desk hadn't erased the rhythm, it had only dulled the edges, and now those edges were coming back. She cleaned the rifle like she was waking it up. A drop of oil here, a wipe there. Every motion deliberate, almost tender. Then came the magazines, 10 of them, 20 rounds each. She disassembled each one, testing the tension of the springs, the smoothness of the followers, the curve of the feed lips. She found one with a faint crack and set it aside. 9 good. She reloaded them methodically. Each round pressed in with a muted click, like the slow ticking of a metronome marking time. Across the base, under the dim yellow light of another tent, Jensen was making his own preparations. A $50 bill slid across a table to the armory clerk. One magazine traded hands. The damage was small, almost invisible, a bent feed lip, a tiny burr on the follower, enough to create chaos in the middle of calm. He slipped it back into her stack while she was called to sign a receipt. When she returned, 10 magazines sat neatly arranged. She didn't notice. 9 perfect, 1 waiting to betray her. When the sun rose the next morning, it did so without mercy. The range shimmered in the heat, long and brutal, steel targets catching the light like distant mirrors. A crowd gathered, operators, spotters, off-duty soldiers. Word had spread. The desk jockey was shooting. Colonel Rostova stood by the firing line, stopwatch in hand, expression carved from granite. Jensen shot first. His rifle gleamed, custom barrel, custom glass, custom pride. He performed every movement loud and precise. Each shot rang out sharp and clean, the sound of a man who wanted to be watched. When he finished, the scoreboard read 51 of 52. Applause, laughter, smug glances. Then it was her turn. Sharma walked to the line. No words, no glance at the audience. Just the deliberate, silent ritual of preparation, mat laid out, rifle set, magazines aligned. She lay prone, her body aligned with the earth, heartbeat sinking to the desert. Shooter ready. She breathed in, half out, ready. Stand by. The world held its breath. Engage. Her first target dropped with a distant ping, then another, and another. A clean, mechanical rhythm, breath, trigger, bolt, breath, trigger, bolt. Jensen's smirk began to fade. The jam came on the 7th round. The bolt stopped halfway, locked in defiance. A small metallic click that sounded like failure. The crowd tensed. Jensen's smile returned. But Sharma didn't react. No curse. No hesitation. Just stillness, a frozen second where even the wind seemed to stop. Then her hands moved. Not frantic, not hurried, just sure. Thumb, release, nothing. Left hand ripped the magazine free. Right hand locked the bolt open. Tilt the rifle, gravity. Not enough. She reached in, gloved fingers surgical, extracted one round, then the next. The action smooth, uninterrupted. 28 seconds. She reloaded, click, bolt forward, chambered. Her eye never left the scope. Next shot hit. And then the next. And the next. The desert echoed with the rhythm of redemption. How long does silence last after the impossible happens? At forward operating base Ares, it lasted 31 seconds. That's how long no one moved, no one breathed, no one spoke after the 50-second ping drifted back across the range. The sound was faint, almost ghostly, a single note of truth that cracked open everything they thought they knew about her. 52 targets, 52 hits. And one sabotaged magazine, cleared mid-battle like it was nothing at all. Anna Sharma lay still for a moment longer, her finger resting on the trigger guard, her breathing steady, eyes open but distant. She wasn't savoring victory, she was remembering something. Some other place where the air had tasted like dust and metal, where she'd heard that same ringing tone in the aftermath of violence. Then she stood. The sun was merciless, turning the steel targets into faint, glimmering ghosts in the distance. The heat waves made her silhouette shimmer as she removed the magazine, engaged the safety, and laid the rifle gently on the mat. Her motions were ritual, clean, reverent, final. Across the range, Jensen's grin had evaporated. The crowd's laughter had dissolved into uneasy quiet. Even Diaz and Bell, who'd mocked her the loudest, stared in the dumb stillness of men who just watched the world tilt off its axis. Colonel Rostova was the first to move. She walked slowly toward the firing line, the stopwatch still in her hand, thumb frozen against its side button. Her boots made a dull crunch in the sand. The wind had died completely, as though the desert itself was waiting to see what would happen next. When she reached the mat, she didn't speak. She bent down, picked up the discarded magazine, the one Sharma had ripped out and dropped during the jam. Her eyes caught the faint gleam of the metal feed lip, just slightly warped. Her thumb brushed over a nearly invisible burr on the follower. And she knew. It was the kind of knowledge that comes fast and cold, instant, perfect damning. A setup, a deliberate failure. Rostova looked up, her gaze slicing across the range like a blade until it found Jensen. His face was pale, the desert tan leached out of it. The smirk was gone. He looked small now and suddenly very young. Rostova held the magazine up, silent accusation made visible. She didn't speak, not yet. She just dropped it back into the dust between them. Then she turned to Sharma. "I've never seen a jam like that cleared so fast," she said quietly. "Nor a perfect score. That wasn't training range muscle memory. That was something else." Her eyes narrowed, sharp but curious now. "Where did you learn to do that?" Sharma's reply was soft, almost an echo. "Chark Valley, Lagar Province. Enemy was inside the wire." That was all, but it was enough. The colonel's face shifted, a flicker of understanding passing through the iron mask. She didn't press further. Some answers didn't need elaboration. A voice came from the far edge of the range, rough, sandpaper against gravel. The old Master Gunny, the base's senior armorer, had been watching the entire qualification in silence. He stepped forward now, his face unreadable but his eyes alive with a strange, dawning recognition. "I saw that once," he said slowly, voice rasping with age and dust. Years ago, same motion, same hands, collapsed flank, one shooter holding off a dozen. Thought she was down when her rifle went quiet. Then, he gestured toward Sharma, she was firing again. He stopped, swallowed hard, and his next words came out like a whisper of legend. They called her Kestrel. The name fell into the hot, still air and landed like a dropped weapon. Something shifted in the crowd, an almost imperceptible collective intake of breath. Kestrel. Every older NCO on that range had heard it, usually in the kind of hushed tones used for ghost stories. A sniper from the early, brutal years of the war. No official records, no confirmed photographs, just reports of a lone figure who'd appear on broken flanks, stabilize them, then vanish into smoke and silence. Command had redacted the files so deeply that even her supposed call sign had been considered classified folklore. But she was standing right there. Jensen's hands tightened on his rifle sling. Bell's face went white. Daya's looked like he wanted to vanish. Rostova stared at Sharma, the clean uniform, the quiet posture, the eyes that had seen far too much to care about proving anything. She understood now why Sharma hadn't flinched at her threats, why she hadn't reacted to mockery. Because this wasn't her first proving ground. It was just another test. The colonel's voice was low, stripped of the earlier contempt. "Master Sergeant, I owe you an apology, and a debt." Sharma's expression didn't change. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. You gave me a fair course." Rostova looked again at Jensen, her jaw tightened. "Fair isn't what you got, Master Sergeant, not even close." She turned, her tone dropping to something cold and absolute. "Sergeant Jensen, Corporal Diaz, Specialist Bell, my office, now." No shouting, no threats, the quiet authority of a commander who no longer needed volume to make fear real. The three men stiffened, color draining from their faces. They walked toward the command tent like condemned prisoners. Every step sounded heavier than the last. When they were gone, the colonel faced Sharma again. For the first time, there was respect in her eyes, not the polite kind that comes with rank, but the rare kind born from witnessing something undeniable. "That rifle you used, is it adequate for your needs?" "It's a good weapon, Colonel." "You'll take any you want from the armory," Rostova said, "including Jensen's custom kit. Operation Serpent's Eye launches in 48 hours. You'll have your own overwatch position. You choose the site. You decide engagement rules. You answer only to me." It was the highest trust a field commander could offer. And Sharma accepted it with the same composure she'd shown all morning. "Understood, ma'am." She gathered her rifle and gear. Around her, soldiers moved aside instinctively, forming a silent path as she walked past. No one spoke. No one dared. The ones who'd mocked her just hours before now stared as if watching something both familiar and alien. A woman carved from calm and precision, walking through the wreckage of their underestimation. That evening, as the sun bled itself out across the desert, the base glowed with a strange quiet. Word spread faster than orders ever did. Kestrel. Some said she wasn't real. Others swore she'd saved entire platoons by herself. And now, apparently, she worked in their armory, cleaning a rifle as if she'd never left the fight. The maintenance bay hummed with the low buzz of halogen lights. Sharma sat alone at the workbench. The M110A1 disassembled before her like an altar offering. The sounds were small, a brush against steel, a pick scraping carbon from the bolt, the faint click of parts aligning. To her, it wasn't maintenance, it was meditation. The ritual of a soldier putting chaos back into order. Each piece had a memory. The firing pin, she'd once checked one like it after a 48-hour overwatch in freezing wind. The bipod, it had saved her aim on a slope in Chark Valley. Every click, every thread of oil, was a story only she remembered. The smell of CLP mixed with dust. The past was close tonight. The footsteps came softly, hesitant. She didn't look up until the sound stopped. 10 feet away stood Jensen. His face was blotchy, his eyes red. The swagger was gone, replaced by a heavy shame that seemed to drag his shoulders down. He held something in his hand, a new magazine still in its plastic wrapper. "The armorer said to give this to you," he said hoarsely. His voice was rough, stripped of rank and pride. He placed it gently on a nearby crate. "He said you'd want it." He didn't meet her eyes. Didn't apologize, maybe because he knew no words could fix what he'd done. Instead, he turned and walked out of the bay, his silhouette shrinking into the night. For a long time, Sharma didn't move. She finished cleaning her rifle piece by piece. The sound of parts sliding home, click, snap, lock, filled the silence like a heartbeat. When she was done, she picked up the new magazine, unwrapped it, inspected the feed lips, tested the spring tension with her thumb. Perfect. She placed it beside the rifle case. A silent acceptance, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Then she stood, closing the case with a soft, final sound. Outside, the desert night had swallowed the base in starlight. The horizon stretched endless and cold, mountains drawn in shadow like the jagged teeth of something ancient. Out there waited Operation Serpent's Eye. She breathed in. The air was cooler now, but it still carried the same taste, dust, metal, memory. For the first time in years, Anna Sharma felt ready. She wasn't thinking about revenge, or redemption, or even victory. She was thinking about precision, about the quiet kind of justice that doesn't shout, doesn't gloat, doesn't need to be seen. It simply acts. And somewhere in the darkness, the old call sign stirred again. Kestrel was back in the hunt. Why did quiet always feel louder before a mission? At 300 hours, forward operating base Ares was a world made of whispers. Generators hummed low. The desert wind, once cruel and dry, moved softly between the Hesco walls, carrying the smell of dust and oil. Most of the camp slept sprawled across bunks, clutching rifles even in dreams. Only the operators were awake, the ones who lived between heartbeat and bullet. Anna Sharma was awake too, sitting on a steel crate beneath a muted red light, a mug of black coffee cooling beside her. She didn't drink it, she just liked the smell. On the bench in front of her, the rifle lay open, a clean, assembled truth gleaming in the half-light. Each screw torqued, each spring balanced. It was a weapon without vanity, only purpose. Operation Serpent's Eye. The mission brief had been concise. Insurgent Command node in the Al-Hajr corridor. High-value targets, meeting confirmed at dawn. Overwatch positions to be established before sunrise. Engagement authorization, limited, only protect the assault element. Rostova had offered her complete autonomy, but autonomy was just another word for isolation. Most snipers worked in pairs, shooter and spotter, two halves of one mind, but Kestrel didn't. She hadn't for years. Solitude suited her now. It was cleaner, simpler, fewer voices, fewer chances for ghosts to talk back. Her gear was already packed: rifle, suppressor, ghillie sheet, water bladder, ration packs, and a single sidearm. Everything else stayed behind. She stood, stretched once, and looked up. The night sky was an infinite, indifferent sprawl. No moon tonight, just the cold gleam of stars scattered like shrapnel. She shouldered her pack. The weight was familiar, not heavy, just real. When she passed through the outer gate, the sentries didn't speak. One of them just gave a small nod, a gesture that carried more respect than words ever could. She moved out into the desert, where the ground was a cracked mosaic of stone and sand. Her boots made no sound. Her silhouette melted into the horizon as if the night itself had swallowed her whole. By 500, she'd reached her Overwatch site, a jagged ridge overlooking the valley where the operation would unfold. The locals called it the Valley of Glass. From above, it looked like an open wound, scarred by years of war. The sand was littered with shards of fused rock, melted fragments from old airstrikes, catching the dawn light like broken mirrors. She lay flat, belly to the earth, rifle cradled in front of her. Through the scope, the valley below was a still painting. Abandoned huts, a rusted truck, a few wisps of smoke curling from a small fire near a collapsed compound wall. Somewhere in that ruin, the enemy waited. The radio crackled softly. Rostova's voice came through, quiet but firm. Kestrel 1, this is Ares Actual. Confirm position. Ares Actual, Kestrel 1. Overwatch established. Optics online. Thermal clean for now. Copy that. Infill team moving to Waypoint Alpha. You have shoot authority only if they're compromised. Understood. Static hissed briefly, then faded. Sharma exhaled slowly, her finger brushing the rifle's trigger guard. She checked wind direction, a faint drift from the west, maybe 1 click per second. The scope's reticle floated over the compound's broken courtyard. She adjusted for range, 1,200 meters, line of sight. And then she waited. Waiting was the real test. It always had been. The desert changed in the slow bleed of dawn. Shadows shortened, colors returned. The world went from silver to gold to white. Heat shimmer began to rise, bending light, distorting shapes. Through the scope, everything seemed to breathe. Time lost meaning, minutes became hours. And in that stillness, the past came creeping. Chark Valley. Lager Province. She hadn't spoken that name in years. The memory wasn't cinematic. It wasn't a firefight bathed in glory. It was chaos, burning dust, screaming radios, the smell of blood and cordite thick in the air. She'd been one of 3 left alive after the perimeter broke. A dozen insurgents pouring through a breach in the wire. Her rifle had jammed. Type 3 malfunction. The same kind. She remembered the panic, the split second of fear, the thought that it was over, and the moment something inside her went cold, still, precise. Her hands had moved on their own, every motion born of survival, not training. 30 seconds later, the gun was firing again. 7 bodies had fallen before reinforcements arrived. They called her Kestrel after that because the bird hunts by hovering still in the air, watching, waiting, then striking once perfectly. The brass had made her a ghost after that. Her file redacted, her identity buried. Too many kills, too much truth for public memory. And now, years later, the ghost was watching another valley. At 6:17, movement flickered in the courtyard below. Through the scope, she saw 4 figures emerge from a half-collapsed building. 2 carried rifles. 1 carried a radio. The 4th wore a white keffiyeh, the target. Confirmed ID. She adjusted focus. Breath in, half out. The crosshairs hovered over his chest. She could end it right there. 1 shot clean, no team risked, no uncertainty. But that wasn't the order. And orders, even after everything, still mattered to her. The radio crackled again, whispering voices, overlapping call signs. The assault team was in position, moving. The plan was holding. She eased her finger off the trigger, forcing her heartbeat to slow. Discipline over impulse, patience over pride. Then static, a voice sharp, panicked. Contact left rear. Gunfire ripped across the channel, distant but distinct. Through the scope, Sharma saw it, muzzle flashes bursting from a ridge above the compound. Ambush, perfectly timed. The assault team was caught in the open. She didn't hesitate. Ares Actual, Kestrel 1. Eyes on hostiles, engaging. Copy Kestrel, engage at will. The rifle's bolt slid forward with a quiet click, and the first shot cracked the dawn. The target with the radio dropped before his weapon hit the ground. Sharma shifted a breath to the right, second target, the ridge line gunner. Pang, dust and silence. She moved like a machine running on instinct. Acquire, adjust, fire, every breath a countdown, every exhale a decision. The assault team scrambled for cover. She heard their shouts faintly through the radio, distorted by static and distance. 3 more hostiles appeared, sprinting along the wall, trying to flank. She tracked them, compensated for drift, and squeezed twice. Two fell. The third disappeared behind a low wall. Then nothing. The radio hissed, then cleared. Rostova's voice tight but controlled. Kestrel status. 5 down, possible 6th behind cover. No friendlies in line of fire. Copy, infill team regrouping. Hold over watch. Solid copy. She exhaled, the sound soft but deliberate. The tension in her hands faded, leaving behind the familiar ache of adrenaline settling. Through the scope, the valley looked peaceful again, quiet, almost innocent. Only the faint smoke betrayed what had just happened. Her finger brushed the trigger one last time, then moved away, safety on. But the peace didn't reach her eyes. Because she'd seen something else, something subtle. In the seconds after her last shot, just before the target dropped, she'd noticed a flash, a glint of glass higher up the ridge, a reflection that didn't belong. Another scope, another shooter. And it wasn't aimed at the enemy. It had been aimed downrange, toward the same Overwatch ridge where she lay. Someone else was watching her. Hours later, back at Ares, the mission was logged as a success. One high-value target neutralized, minimal friendly casualties, operation secured. The colonel's voice over comms had been crisp, efficient, grateful. But gratitude didn't erase the quiet thought that now followed her like a shadow. Someone had eyes on her position. Someone who wasn't supposed to. In the mess tent, soldiers talked about the mission with reverence. Kestrel saved the team, one whispered. She dropped 5 tangos in 30 seconds. But Sharma didn't stay to listen. She sat alone outside under the open sky, the night wind brushing against her hair. Her rifle leaned beside her chair, magazine removed, chamber empty. Her hands were steady now, but her mind was. If someone was watching her today, it meant one of two things. Either the insurgents had another sniper, or someone at Ares had leaked her position. She thought of Jensen, now confined to administrative limbo awaiting disciplinary review. He didn't have access to operational briefs anymore. But someone did. And as she stared out into the darkness beyond the floodlights, she couldn't shake the feeling that Operation Serpent's Eye wasn't over. That this wasn't the mission, it was the prelude. There was something else out there. Something that had seen her. And for the first time in years, Kestrel, the legend, the ghost, the myth, felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since Chark Valley. Uncertainty. Why did it feel colder after victory? The desert hadn't changed, still the same furnace of dust and light, but something in the air at Fob Ares had shifted. Everyone smiled at her now, too easily, too quickly. Respect, admiration, whatever it was, it felt hollow. Because respect built overnight was just another kind of performance. Master Sergeant Anna Sharma, once invisible, was now a myth that people wanted to stand beside. Kestrel, they whispered when she passed, as if the name itself could ward off bad luck. But legends have long shadows. And sometimes, those shadows hide the ones still aiming back. The day after Operation Serpent's Eye, Sharma was summoned to Colonel Rostova's tent. The air inside was thick with tension, not the hostile kind, but the weight of something unsaid. Maps still covered the walls, but new overlays glowed red in the dim light. Satellite images, infrared patterns, drone telemetry. Rostova didn't look up when Sharma entered. She was staring at a monitor, frowning. "Close the flap," she said. Sharma obeyed. For a few moments, there was only the faint hum of the electronics. Then Rostova exhaled through her nose and turned. "We reviewed your feed from the operation. Clean hits, controlled breathing, no wasted movement, it was textbook." She paused, then leaned closer. "But I noticed something you didn't report." Sharma stayed silent. That reflection in the ridge. There it was, the thing that had been living in the back of her mind since the shot. Rostova tapped a key. The drone footage froze mid-frame. On the screen, through a wash of pale dust, a pinpoint flash glimmered on a higher slope, there and gone in a heartbeat. "Lens flare?" the colonel asked softly. "Or something else?" "Not the sun," Sharma replied. "Wrong angle, wrong time, it was glass." Rostova studied her for a long moment. "Sniper." Maybe. The reflection was steady, trained. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. The colonel sat back, eyes narrowing. "Then someone was watching our overwatch, watching you." That silence again, the kind that carried more meaning than any report. Finally, Rostova spoke. "We pulled intel from higher command. There's been chatter, low-level, fragmented, about foreign-trained marksmen moving through the corridor. Contractors, mercs, off-book operations, nothing concrete." Sharma's eyes flicked to the map. "Friendly." "I don't believe in friendly shadows," the colonel said flatly. Later that evening, as dusk turned the base the color of burnt copper, Sharma sat alone on the roof of an old supply container overlooking the perimeter. The wind smelled of iron and diesel. Below her, the compound glowed under yellow lights, the fences lined with concertina wire like a halo of steel. She sipped water, slow and methodical. The taste was faintly metallic, but it grounded her. She'd seen reflections before, but never like that, not aimed at her. And yet, a small part of her wasn't surprised. People like her didn't stay ghosts forever. Eventually, someone wanted to know if the legend still bled. She thought of Jensen, grounded, stripped of rank, now invisible again. He had looked shattered the last time she saw him, but guilt was a complicated thing. Sometimes it curdled into hatred, sometimes it didn't die at all. No, he didn't have the reach anymore. This was something else. A faint sound pulled her out of thought, footsteps on gravel below, measured, deliberate. She shifted slightly, hand resting near her sidearm. It was Colonel Rostova. "Permission to join you?" the colonel asked. Sharma nodded. The colonel climbed up, a faint grunt betraying fatigue. She sat beside her, boots dangling over the edge, silence stretching between them. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind carried the faint, far-off echo of small arms fire from some other outpost miles away. Finally, Rostova said, "You know what bothers me most about what we saw?" Sharma turned her head slightly. "It wasn't that someone was watching us," the colonel said. "It's that they didn't shoot." Sharma absorbed that. It was true. Whoever it was, they'd had position, range, opportunity, yet they hadn't taken the shot. "They wanted me to know," Sharma said quietly. "A flash like that doesn't happen by accident." Rostova nodded. "A message, then?" "Maybe." The colonel gave a small, humorless smile. "You ever get tired of this life, Kestrel?" Sharma didn't answer immediately. She looked out toward the horizon, the endless ripple of dunes and rock, the night crawling in from the edges. "Tired," she said finally. "No, just aware." "Aware of what?" "That the job never ends. Even when they send you home, it follows you back. Every sound, every light, every movement in a window, it's like the world becomes one long overwatch." Rostova's voice softened. "That's a lonely way to live." Sharma gave a faint smile. "Better than pretending you're safe." The colonel sighed, stood, brushed dust from her uniform. "Get some rest, Master Sergeant. Intel's pulling imagery from last night's ridge. If there's a ghost out there, we'll find it." As she climbed down, her voice drifted up, half admiring, half weary. "You really are something, Kestrel. They should have never buried you." Sharma didn't reply. She just kept watching the horizon until the colonel disappeared into the lights below. Sleep didn't come. She lay in her bunk, eyes open, the hum of the AC unit masking the restless thoughts. The reflection replayed in her head again and again, a heartbeat of light, too deliberate, too controlled. And beneath it, another image, a man's face blurred by dust and time from a lifetime ago. Afghanistan, 2009. The day after Chark Valley. She'd been in a field hospital, half-deaf from blast concussion, cleaning her rifle on the edge of her cot when he'd approached her. A contractor. No name, no insignia. Just a scar over one eyebrow and eyes that didn't blink enough. "You clear jams faster than anyone I've ever seen," he'd said. "Training, sir." "No," he'd smiled thinly. "That's instinct. You can't teach that. You want out of the course someday, call this number." She hadn't, not then, not ever, but some part of her had memorized that voice, the cadence of it, calm, deliberate, dangerous. And last night, listening to the calm chatter echo through the static, she could have sworn she'd heard it again. A clipped syllable on a scrambled channel. An old ghost breathing across a radio band. It wasn't possible, and yet. She sat up, heart thudding once, hard. The barracks around her were dark, filled with the quiet breathing of sleeping soldiers. She slid from her bunk, laced her boots, and left without a sound. The night outside was ink black, the kind of darkness that swallows footsteps. She crossed to the comms trailer, its glow spilling weakly through slitted curtains. Inside, a young specialist sat half asleep at the console. He jumped when she entered. "Master Sergeant, sorry, ma'am." "At ease," she said quietly. "I need last night's comm logs. Time window between 6:10 and 6:20. Operation Serpent's Eye." The specialist hesitated. "That's encrypted, ma'am. Colonel's orders." She stared at him, not angry, just steady. "Then decrypt it. I'll take responsibility." He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Minutes ticked by as the computer scrolled lines of radio data, converted fragments into rough waveform transcripts. The room smelled faintly of coffee and ozone. "There," the specialist said, pointing to a section of static spiked text. "Off-frequency burst, maybe a feedback echo." She leaned closer. The letters flickered on screen, distorted by transmission loss, but one phrase stood out, buried inside the noise. Wind on the scope, eyes still on her. Her pulse quickened. She memorized the timestamp, then she deleted the playback. When she left the trailer, the wind was picking up again, whispering through the fences. She walked to the edge of the perimeter where the desert stretched endless and black. For a long time she stood there, scanning the ridges with her naked eyes. Nothing moved, no flash, no glint. And yet she felt it, the weight of attention, the kind that doesn't come from paranoia but experience. Someone was still out there, and they wanted her to know it. The next morning the base awoke to the routine rhythm of military life. Engines revving, boots pounding gravel, shouts carrying orders over distance. To anyone else it was normal. But Anna felt the rhythm differently, offbeat, syncopated, a heartbeat out of place. She was cleaning her rifle on the bench when Colonel Rostova entered the bay without warning. "Intel found something," the colonel said. "Thermal anomaly on the northern ridge, same area you flagged, human size, disappeared before dawn." Sharma looked up, no follow-up trace. None, like they melted into the rock. Rostova exhaled, her jaw tight. "We're tightening comms. No one gets operational data outside direct channels. I don't want another ghost walking through my AO." "Yes, ma'am." The colonel paused at the door. "One more thing. We're getting visitors from command tomorrow. They requested to observe your next qualification, something about performance metrics." Sharma frowned. Command never cared about metrics. "I know," Rostova said. "That's what worries me." She left. Sharma sat there, still as stone, her reflection glinting off the rifle's scope. Visitors, observers. And a second scope somewhere out there in the desert, watching her from afar. She knew what it meant now. This wasn't a coincidence. It was an invitation. Someone from her past, someone who knew exactly who Kestrel was, had come looking. And this time, they weren't here to kill her. They were testing her aim. Why do ghosts always come dressed like men in uniform? That was the first thing Anna Sharma thought when the black Suburban rolled through the gates of Forward Operating Base Aries. It was late morning, the sun already a white blade in the sky. The Ospreys on the tarmac shimmered in the heat haze as the convoy stopped near the command tent. 3 men stepped out, clean uniforms, no unit patches, boots that looked like they'd never seen dust. The kind of men who didn't belong anywhere but were allowed everywhere. Colonel Rostova met them first. Sharma watched from a distance, leaning against a sandbag wall, rag in one hand, rifle resting across her knees. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she didn't need to. She knew the rhythm, polite tones, small smiles, sharp eyes, predators masking as colleagues. One of the men, tall, gray-haired, scanned the base like he was taking inventory of ghosts. Then his gaze landed on her, and held. It wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. Sharma felt it in her chest, a small tightening, a memory pressing against scar tissue. She looked away first. 2 hours later, Colonel Rostova called her in. The air inside the tent was colder than usual. The portable AC worked overtime, humming like a nervous heart. The 3 visitors sat at the briefing table, folders unopened. "Master Sergeant Sharma," Rostova said, her tone clipped but guarded. "These gentlemen are here from Special Activities Command. They're conducting a review of recent operations." The gray-haired man gave a practiced smile. "Review sounds bureaucratic. Think of it as coordination." His voice was smooth, calm, too even. He gestured to the seat opposite him. "Please sit." Sharma remained standing. "I prefer to stand, sir." His smile deepened, but his eyes didn't change. Still the same as the after-action reports describe. Rostova frowned. "You've read her reports." "All of them," the man said, "even the ones that don't officially exist." The colonel's jaw tightened. The man flipped open a folder. Inside were pages stamped classified REDACTED. He slid one across the table. It showed a grainy thermal still, a silhouette on a ridgeline, rifle raised, hair pulled back tight against the desert wind. "Chark Valley," he said quietly. 14 years ago, one shooter held a breach against overwhelming odds. We've been following that name ever since." "Kestrel," the second man said. The word hung in the air like dust. Rostova glanced at Sharma, then back at the visitors. "What exactly do you want from my master sergeant?" "Nothing she hasn't already given," the gray-haired one replied. "We're just confirming capability, verifying consistency." "Consistency," Rostova repeated flatly. "You mean obedience." The man ignored her. He turned his gaze back to Sharma. "We monitored Operation Serpent's Eye. The reflection you saw on the ridge wasn't enemy glass. It was ours." The room seemed to shrink. Sharma's voice was quiet but sharp. "You were tracking me." "Assessing," he corrected. "Same procedure as before. You remember the contractor who approached you after Chark Valley?" Her stomach went cold. "You." He nodded once. "Different name back then, same job." Rostova straightened, fury breaking through her restraint. "You endangered an active mission to run a covert evaluation. You compromised Overwatch protocol." "Colonel," the man said, raising a hand, his tone ice calm. "No one was endangered. The test confirmed what we needed. Kestrel's instincts haven't degraded." Rostova's hands curled into fists. "She's a soldier, not a lab specimen." He ignored her again, still watching Sharma. "You never took our offer. You could have led a unit that doesn't officially exist. Unlimited clearance. Full autonomy. Instead, you hid behind paper and policy." "I served where I was ordered," she said. He smiled faintly. "And yet, you still shoot better than anyone alive." A pause stretched long and uncomfortable. Then he slid another document forward, a new operations order, black cover, no insignia. The top line read, "Operation GLASSWING. We want you for this. Direct tasking. No chain of command interference. Clean extraction in 6 weeks. Rostova's voice was sharp, out of the question. The man didn't look at her. Colonel, this conversation doesn't require your approval. Sharma spoke before the colonel could answer. What's the target? The gray-haired man's smile thinned. You don't need details yet, only that it's personal. Her heartbeat slowed, heavy in her ears. Personal. He leaned back. Someone out there used to work for us. Went rogue. They know your methods. They left you a message during Serpent's Eye. That flash you saw wasn't warning. It was invitation. Rostova looked between them. You're telling me another one of your ghosts is hunting her. The man didn't answer directly. We prefer to say observing. Sharma's voice was steady now, almost detached. You built another kestrel. A prototype, he admitted. Incomplete, undisciplined, but dangerous. We need the original to clean up the mess. Rostova slammed her palm on the table. Absolutely not. She's under my command. The man finally turned his cold gaze on the colonel. She's under ours, Colonel. Always was. The words dropped like stones. Sharma didn't flinch, but something inside her twisted, an old, familiar nausea. She suspected it for years. That she hadn't been rescued from Chark Valley by luck but by design. That her survival had been orchestrated. Why now, she asked. Because he's resurfaced, the man said simply. The one you call the other shooter, codename Havoc. He's been sighted within 200 kilometers of here. Sharma's eyes darkened. And you want me to do what? Kill him? Neutralize, the man said. Interpret the term however you like. Rostova stood. If this goes through official channels, I'll file a protest. You're endangering my base for your Black Book vendettas. Do what you must, the man said, closing the folder, but the directive's already signed. He rose, offered Sharma a businesslike nod. Briefing packet will be in your quarters. Wheels up tomorrow night. Think carefully before refusing. Some ghosts get erased, others just fade the hard way. The 3 men left as quietly as they'd arrived, their convoy disappearing into the glare of noon. When they were gone, Rostova exhaled hard and looked at Sharma. You don't have to go. Sharma shook her head slowly. You know that's not true. The colonel's voice dropped to a whisper. Then at least promise me one thing, come back. Sharma looked down at her hands, steady, scarred still. I'll try. That night the base was restless. News of the visit spread fast, wrapped in speculation and rumor. Some said the brass wanted to promote her. Others whispered darker things, special operations, off-the-books kills, disappearances. Sharma ignored them all. She sat alone in the maintenance bay again, the same bench where she'd once cleared the sabotaged magazine. Only now the air felt heavier, charged. On the table lay a folded set of papers, the Glasswing briefing. Inside were coordinates, topographic scans, and one photo. A blurred infrared image of a sniper kneeling beside a wrecked pickup, scope reflecting faintly in the dark. Even through the distortion, she recognized the posture, the tilt of the head, the calm stillness before a shot. Havoc. They'd trained together once, not formally, but in the same crucible of necessity. Afghanistan, Yemen, unnamed deserts. He'd been good, maybe even better. But where she'd sought precision, he'd chased perfection. The kind that corrodes the soul. She thought he was dead. She'd been wrong. The wind outside picked up, rattling the steel walls like distant thunder. She reached for her rifle case, opened it, checked each part as if by touch alone she could prepare for whatever waited out there. Bolt clean, barrel true. Magazine tight spring, no burrs this time. The ritual steadied her heartbeat. As she locked the case, a faint knock sounded on the bay door. It slid open slightly. A shadow stepped inside, Jensen. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of everything but shame and sincerity. I heard, he said quietly, they're sending you out again. She nodded once. He hesitated, then set something on the table, a battered spotting scope, edges wrapped with black tape. It's calibrated for desert glare. You'll need it. She studied him for a moment. Why help me now? He swallowed hard. Because you didn't bury me when you could have. She gave a small nod, not gratitude but acknowledgement. Thank you, Sergeant. He started to turn, then stopped. You think the story they told about you, about Kestrel, you think it ever ends? She looked at the rifle. Stories like ours don't end, they just change names. When he left, she stood for a long while, the bay lights flickering overhead. The wind howled again, carrying the scent of sand and distance. She picked up the scope, adjusted the focus, and for a brief instant caught her own reflection in the glass, her eyes staring back, calm and ancient. Tomorrow she'd go hunting again. Not for war, not for glory. For closure. Because sometimes ghosts don't fade. Sometimes they have to be found. And this time, Kestrel wasn't the hunted. She was the warning. How long could a human heart stay silent before it forgot how to beat for anything but duty? Anna Sharma didn't know anymore. The Osprey lifted into the pre-dawn darkness, its blades carving the air into thunder. Below her, forward operating base Ares shrank, a grid of flickering lights swallowed by the desert's endless black. Inside the cargo bay, the red interior lights painted everything in blood tones. She sat strapped in by the window, helmet off, hair tied back, her rifle case secured between her boots. No insignia, no identifying marks. Just a small black patch stitched to her shoulder, a kestrel in flight, wings outstretched. No one else aboard spoke. The two-man crew up front didn't even glance back. Her orders were sealed, her route unlisted. She wasn't technically alive on any manifest tonight. The aircraft cut low through the valley winds, following the terrain. Every vibration, every mechanical rattle seemed amplified in the stillness between rotor beats. When the pilot finally spoke through the intercom, it was short and neutral. Drop zone in 2 mics. She nodded, though no one could see. The Osprey flared, dust boiling beneath it. She stepped out before the landing gear fully touched ground, one practiced motion, one clean departure. The aircraft lifted immediately, vanishing into the pale edge of the horizon. And then she was alone. Truly alone. The desert stretched around her like an ocean drained of life, dunes and ridges, dry riverbeds carved like veins into the earth. She adjusted her pack, scanning the horizon. The coordinates from Operation Glasswing pointed 20 kilometers northwest. A network of old smuggler tunnels and a ruined communications tower perched on an escarpment. That was the suspected vantage point, Havoc's last trace. She began to move. Every step was deliberate, calculated. No wasted effort, no sound beyond the crunch of sand under boots. The wind moved softly, brushing grains across her goggles. After 2 hours, she reached the high ridge. The tower loomed above her, skeletal metal twisted by time and heat. A single crow perched near the top, silent. She set down her pack, assembled the rifle, checked the scope alignment. Her hands worked with mechanical precision, but her thoughts moved elsewhere, backward, into places she didn't want to go. Havoc. She remembered the first time she'd seen him, not as a rival but as a reflection. Back then they'd called him Lieutenant Mace Haviland. Havoc only came later. He'd been part of an off-book training detachment, contractors shaping special operators to shoot without conscience, to operate without emotion. He'd been her opposite in everything but skill, loud where she was quiet, reckless where she was patient. But he'd had that same stillness in the eye, the sniper's curse. The ability to slow the world down until every motion, every heartbeat was a calculation. They shared a single mission before the world turned to fire. A night in Kandahar where she'd seen him make a shot through glass, wind and darkness that should have been impossible. After that, he'd disappeared. Rumor said he'd gone private. Rumor said he'd gone rogue. Now he was back, or someone wanted her to believe he was. She lay prone beside her rifle, scanning the valley below. The landscape shimmered under the first thin light of morning. Heat ghosts already danced on the horizon, bending reality like water. Through her scope, she saw remnants of an old camp, scorched tents, a burned-out truck, and something else. A small cairn of stones, carefully stacked. Not random, not natural, a marker. She descended slowly, boots sinking into the powdery sand, every motion silent. When she reached the cairn, she crouched. Something metallic glinted between the stones. A casing, .308 caliber, polished, placed, not dropped. She turned it in her gloved fingers. Scratched into the brass were two words, hand-etched with a blade. Still watching. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't a warning. It was a message meant only for her. She looked up, scanning the ridgelines through her scope, and for an instant, a shimmer of glass flashed far to the west. Just once. Then gone. She dropped flat, rolling behind the truck's burned chassis. The world went quiet except for the pulse in her ears. Her breath slowed. Her eyes tracked the angles. The flash had come from a high ridge 1,400 meters out. Same position pattern she'd have used. Same calculation she would have made. Her radio was dead silent. No drone cover. No satellite uplink. Whoever set this meeting wanted it clean, no witnesses. Fine. She unpacked the spotting scope Jensen had given her, propped it beside the rifle, and began to scan. The glass shimmered again, just barely, a reflection dancing along a rock outcropping. Then it steadied. Movement. A silhouette. He was lying prone, same as her, watching, not aiming, just waiting. Her hand hovered over the trigger. She could take the shot. She had the wind, the range, the advantage. But instinct screamed, don't. Because this wasn't an ambush, it was theater. He wanted her to see him. He wanted to see what she'd do. She stayed still, breathing slow, one eye pressed to the scope. Then, impossibly, his rifle barrel tilted upward away from her. A small gesture, a signal, not today. And then through her scope, she saw something flutter on the ridge beside him. A small piece of cloth tied to a rock. White. A truce. Or bait. He raised one hand briefly, fingers spread in a half salute, half wave, before sliding backward and vanishing from sight. No sound, no movement, just gone. She stayed prone for 10 minutes, then 20, eyes never leaving the ridge. Nothing, not a ripple of motion. Finally, she sat up, her muscles trembling from the stillness. The wind picked up, dragging a veil of sand across the valley, erasing his footprints before she even reached the spot where he'd been. When she got there, she found another casing. Same caliber, same etching. But this one read, "You shouldn't have come." She stared at it for a long time, the wind tugging her hair loose from the tie. Who was he warning? Her, or whoever had sent her here. By nightfall, she'd set camp inside a collapsed bunker halfway down the ridge. She cooked nothing, lit nothing, only sipped warm water and listened to the wind. The desert was a cruel listener. It gave nothing back but echoes. She checked her rifle again, then unrolled a small weatherproof journal from her pack, not official issue, just a plain black book. She wrote only 3 sentences. Glasswing field contact confirmed. Target non-hostile, possible countermission. Someone's lying. She tore the page out, folded it, and slipped it into the lining of her pack. Then she leaned back against the cold wall, eyes half closed, letting memory fill the space. She remembered Havoc's voice from Kandahar, the one thing he'd said before the mission that went sideways. One day, they'll turn us into myths so they don't have to live with what we did. She hadn't believed him then. Now she wasn't sure. Her radio crackled suddenly, a faint burst of static. She froze, hand on the receiver. Kestrel. The voice was low, distorted by distance and interference, but she knew it instantly. Havoc. No response. Then you shouldn't trust them. They don't want me dead. They want both of us gone. The signal faded into static. Her pulse slowed, not from fear but recognition. He wasn't lying. She could hear it in the tone, that quiet, level calm that only comes when truth and regret meet in the same breath. She looked out across the dunes. The stars above seemed colder tonight, like eyes without empathy. Somewhere out there, Havoc was moving. Not as an enemy, but as a mirror. She thought of the gray-haired man in the briefing tent, of his voice when he said personal. It wasn't just a mission, it was containment. Glasswing wasn't about Havoc at all. It was about erasing what both of them represented, soldiers who'd learned to act without orders, to think without permission, to live without fear. She stood slowly, every motion deliberate. The desert wind wrapped around her like a whisper. Kestrel, the radio hissed once more, almost swallowed by noise. Then a single word, faint and final. Run. She didn't. She turned off the radio, packed her rifle, and began walking toward the ridge he'd disappeared behind. Because ghosts don't run from the past. They walk straight into it. And if tonight was a trap, she'd spring it on her own terms. The desert remembered every footprint, every silence, every echo. And tonight, it would remember her again. How do you face the part of yourself that survived when it shouldn't have? Anna Sharma didn't know. But as she climbed the western ridge under a half-broken moon, she suspected she was about to find out. The desert was deathly still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, afraid to disturb what was coming. She moved like a shadow, deliberate, weightless, each step measured through sand and stone. The air smelled of dry iron and the faint, bitter tang of ozone. Above her, the stars blurred through rising heat ghosts, distorting the heavens like ripples on old glass. She'd been walking for 3 hours since Havoc's voice had broken across her radio. Run. She hadn't. Not because she was fearless, but because fear had lost its usefulness long ago. Now cresting the ridge, she saw it, the remains of the communications tower. It leaned crooked, its skeletal frame stabbing upward from the plateau like the bones of something that had tried to reach the sky and failed. A single figure stood near its base, still, waiting. She stopped 200 meters out and dropped to a knee. Through her scope, she studied him. Camouflage faded, no unit patch, rifle slung across his chest, barrel pointed down. The wind tugged at the edges of his scarf. His hair was longer now, threaded with gray, but the profile was unmistakable. Havoc. He wasn't aiming. He wasn't hiding. He was just there, standing in the open like a confession. She should have taken the shot. Every trained instinct screamed for it. The range was perfect, the wind low, the threat potential high. But instinct wasn't the same as intent. And Havoc wasn't acting like a threat. She exhaled, rose, and began walking toward him, slowly, rifle held low, barrel down just like his. The ground between them was an ocean of silence. Each step felt like crossing years instead of meters. When she stopped 20 paces away, he spoke first. You still move like time doesn't matter. Her voice was calm, and you still talk like you own it. A faint smile, the same crooked, unrepentant curve she remembered from Kandahar. Didn't think they'd actually send you, he said. I figured you learned better. Apparently not. He nodded, glancing past her at the empty horizon. They told you I went rogue. They said you broke protocol, killed an asset. He laughed softly, dry, bitter, hollow. Is that the story now? It's the only one they let me read. He looked at her again, his eyes sharper now. And you believed it. I stopped believing stories a long time ago. The wind picked up between them, whispering through the tower's broken struts. It sounded like something sighing, metal remembering motion. He tilted his head slightly. They called the op glasswing, didn't they? She nodded. He smiled without humor. Of course they did. Pretty name for a dirty trick. You know what a glasswing is? She didn't answer. It's a butterfly, he said quietly. Transparent wings. Looks fragile, but it's not. It's invisible until you catch the light just right, then you realize you've been looking at it the whole time. He paused, then added, that's what we were to them. Transparent weapons. Useful only when needed, erased when we became inconvenient. She studied his face. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, carved by regret and sand. He looked older but not weaker, just tired in a way that no amount of sleep could cure. What do they want, Havoc? She asked. Why send me? He chuckled softly. You already know they want us to kill each other. One clean report, 2 ghosts gone, loose ends tied. Her silence confirmed it. He looked at her rifle, then at his own. You think it bothers them that we're still out here, that we remember? It scares them, she said. Good. They stood in silence again. Somewhere far off, a dust devil spiraled across the dunes, twisting into the dark before collapsing. Havoc took a slow step closer. You ever wonder why we survived Chark Valley? She said nothing. He continued. It wasn't luck. The breach, the jam, the rescue call, all of it, they set it up. You were supposed to break. They were testing thresholds, pain, response, efficiency under collapse. I was in the other sector that day, same parameters, different variables. Her jaw tightened. You're saying they engineered it. I'm saying we weren't soldiers that day. We were data. The words hit harder than gunfire. Sharma looked away, scanning the desert not for threats, but to find something solid in a world that suddenly was. They call what we did classified, Havoc said, but the truth's simpler. We were proof of concept. The first generation of autonomous field snipers, human enough to improvise, trained enough to follow orders without question. She finally met his eyes, and you broke the pattern. I started asking why. The air between them seemed to hum, the desert heat shimmering like water between 2 mirages. So you ran, she said. I refused to pull the trigger on a farmer holding a radio. They called it insubordination. I called it clarity. Her hand flexed against her rifle, and now I'm finishing what they started. I've been collecting pieces, proof, files, comm intercepts, everything they buried under your call sign and mine, and I needed you to see the truth before they erased me for good. He reached slowly into his vest pocket, withdrew a small data drive, and placed it on a rock between them. This has everything. Their experiments, their operations, even the fake commendations they used to hide casualties. You were the template, Anna, the perfect record. They built the lie around you. She stared at the drive. It was small, unremarkable, the kind of thing you could overlook and never realize it carried the weight of ghosts. Why give it to me? She asked. Because you still believe in something, and I stopped. A pause. Because I owe you for not taking that shot right now. Her voice softened, but only slightly. You think I woe? He gave a faint, genuine smile. No, I think you'll wait until you have a reason. A low rumble echoed in the distance, thunder or maybe rotor wash. They both turned instinctively. Far on the horizon, faint lights glimmered in the dust, moving fast, deliberate. Extraction team, he said. They'll kill you. They'll kill both of us if you don't move. The lights grew brighter, cutting across the valley like predatory eyes. Go, Anna. She didn't move. Go, he barked, stepping back toward the shadows of the ruined tower. Take the drive and run. The first flare cracked the sky, white, blinding. The sound of engines followed. For a moment, time folded in on itself, just like Chark Valley, just like every other time the world tried to burn her memory clean. She snatched the drive and dove behind a rock outcropping as gunfire shattered the silence. The rounds hit the sand where Havoc had stood. Dust exploded around him. He moved like a ghost, fast, low, deliberate, firing short, controlled bursts toward the oncoming vehicles. "Stop shooting," she shouted into her radio, even though she knew no one was listening. The drones above buzzed faintly, small, silent, government gray. Their targeting lights blinked red, sweeping the ridge. Havoc's rifle barked again, one shot, then another, then stopped. Kestrel, his voice rasped through her earpiece, almost drowned by static. "They're not after me. They're after what you have." More gunfire, the flash of a grenade. The tower shuddered, part of it collapsing in a slow, grinding scream of metal. She saw him through the dust, running, half stumbling toward the edge of the ridge. For a heartbeat, their eyes met again through smoke and distance. He smiled once, tired, defiant human. Then he disappeared into the explosion that swallowed the tower. The sound rolled across the desert, hollow and final. She stayed down until the dust settled. The ospreys circled above like vultures, their searchlights cutting long white scars through the smoke. She crawled out slowly, clutching the data drive. Her chest felt tight, not with fear, but with the kind of grief that doesn't cry, the kind that simply is. She scanned the ridge. Nothing. No movement. No body. Just a burned stretch of sand and the twisted skeleton of what had once been communication, a perfect metaphor for everything between them. "Ares Actual," she whispered into the dead radio, voice shaking only slightly. "This is Kestrel. Mission compromised." No answer. She stood, shoulders squared against the rising wind. The drive felt impossibly heavy in her hand. Behind her, the desert swallowed the last traces of fire. Ahead, only distance. She started walking, one step, then another. Not running, never running. Because what she carried now wasn't just data, it was truth. And truth was the most dangerous weapon left in her arsenal. What does silence sound like after you've heard the world burn? For Anna Sharma, it sounded like the wind scraping across metal, steady, patient, eternal. The desert dawn came slow. No fanfare, no light show, just a pale, reluctant glow spilling across the dunes, painting everything in muted gold. She walked all night. No drone shadows, no aircraft hum, just her boots tracing a solitary path across a world that had forgotten how to care. By the time she reached the highway, her legs ached and her lips cracked from the dry air. The road stretched endlessly north, a gray scar between horizons. She followed it until a convoy found her, a supply truck escorted by 2 Humvees. When they stopped, the soldiers inside didn't recognize her at first. No insignia, dust covering her face and hair, just another figure walking out of nowhere. "Name?" the driver asked, hand resting near his rifle. "Kestrel," she said quietly. The driver blinked, then lowered his hand. "Get in, ma'am." She said nothing during the ride. The soldiers didn't ask. Some silences carry their own authority. By the time the convoy reached Forward Operating Base Ares, the sun was high, burning white. The base looked smaller now, familiar yet distant, like a photograph from another life. Colonel Rostova met her near the perimeter gate, flanked by 2 MPs. Her expression flickered between relief and restrained fury. "You're supposed to be dead," the colonel said flatly. "Not today." Rostova studied her for a moment, then dismissed the MPs with a gesture. They stepped away, leaving the 2 women standing alone in the desert heat. "Report," Rostova said. Sharma unzipped a side pocket of her pack and pulled out the small data drive, its black casing dulled by sand. She held it up between 2 fingers. "This is what they were really running." Rostova's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "Proof, files, recordings, directives, everything. Glasswing wasn't a recovery op. It was cleanup. They wanted me to erase Havoc and then they'd erase me." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Where is he?" Sharma hesitated, the truth caught in her throat. She wasn't sure. "He's gone," she said finally. Rostova didn't press. Maybe she understood. Maybe she didn't need to. "Come with me," she said. They walked to the command tent. Inside, the air conditioner still hummed that same nervous rhythm. The maps on the table were unchanged. The men who had visited days before gone. Only the faint smell of coffee and dust remained, as if nothing had ever happened. Sharma set the drive on the table. It clicked softly against the metal. Rostova looked at it like a live grenade. "You realize if this is what you say it is, it'll never see daylight." "I know." "Then why bring it back?" Sharma's eyes met hers, calm, measured, old. "Because truth deserves to exist, even if it dies unseen." Rostova sat down slowly, elbows on her knees. "They'll come for it, for you." "I know that too. You could have run." "I've been running my whole life, ma'am. I'm tired of it." The colonel studied her for a long moment. Then, with deliberate care, she slid the drive into a locked drawer in the desk. "If this disappears," she said quietly, "I'll deny ever seeing it, but I'll make sure someone somewhere keeps a copy. That's all I can promise." "That's enough," Sharma said. Rostova leaned back, exhaling. "You're not safe here." "Nowhere is." A small smile, the kind that isn't happy, just true. The colonel reached out a hand. "You did good, Anna. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing." For the first time in days, the sniper's composure cracked, not visibly, but in the eyes. That small flicker of warmth, of human weight. She shook the colonel's hand. "Thank you, ma'am." That evening, the sky over Aries turned the color of rust and violet. The base buzzed faintly, engines, boots, laughter from the mess hall. Ordinary sounds of soldiers trying to forget the extraordinary. Sharma stood alone on the perimeter wall, watching the horizon fade into shadow. She thought about Havoc, the way he'd smiled before the explosion, the calm acceptance in his eyes, the kind of peace only found at the edge of purpose. Part of her wanted to believe he'd survived, that somewhere beyond that ridge, he was still walking under the same sky. But belief wasn't her language anymore. Observation was. She took a slow breath, the air dry and heavy with heat. Then she closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something other than readiness. Not pride, not sorrow, something quieter. Release. When she opened her eyes again, the sun had dipped below the dunes, leaving a single star trembling above the horizon. She spoke softly, barely above the wind. "Maybe that's all we were ever meant to be, witnesses." The wind carried the words away. Later that night, she packed lightly, a single duffel, no insignia. In the locker, she left her old rifle case behind. Not as abandonment, but as offering. On the lid, she taped a note written in neat, steady handwriting. "For whoever carries it next. Keep your eyes open. And never shoot what you don't understand." Then she walked out of the barracks and into the open air. The night was cool, a rare mercy. The moon hung low, bright enough to guide her steps. At the gate, the guard nodded silently. No orders were exchanged, no questions asked. She just walked past the line of light into the waiting dark. No transport, no escort, just a figure fading into the horizon, carrying nothing but the memory of what she'd done and the choice she refused to regret. A week later, a classified report circulated quietly through command channels. No sender, no signature, just an encrypted file containing fragments of glasswing and an attached message that read, "The truth is never the threat, the lie is." Within days, certain names vanished from the personnel lists. Certain projects went dark. And somewhere in an empty office, a single Kestrel patch sat folded on a desk beside a burned-out hard drive. The desert doesn't keep secrets. It only buries them until the wind decides otherwise. Sometimes, when the dawn is clear and the horizon glows gold, the soldiers at Ares swear they can see a lone figure standing on the far ridge, motionless, watching. No one ever confirms it. No one ever doubts it. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's a ghost, or maybe it's just the wind remembering her name. Anna Sharma, Kestrel, the one they tried to erase, the one who chose silence, not surrender. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.